Hi there, folks. Welcome back to Miracle Readiness with Nate Kokernot, and thank you for joining me if you're new here. So I am going through the text of A Course in Miracles. We took a break from that last episode as I got into the weeds a little bit with a question that somebody asked, but now I'm getting right back into it. And so this could be a long episode because the particular section that we're dealing with today is both long and full of things to clarify, let's say. So let's jump right in. This is section 7 of chapter 2 of A Course in Miracles, COA version. It's called The Miracle as the Means of Healing. The new emphasis will now be on healing. The miracle is the means, the atonement the principle, and the healing is the result. Those who speak of the miracle of healing are combining two orders of reality inappropriately. Healing is not a miracle. The atonement, or the final miracle, is purely a means, while any type of healing is a result. So, the atonement, once again, is the principle that we are all one mind. We have not separated into these fragmented minds with personal agendas, personal intentions. That's all a myth that has turned into an optical illusion of space and time, essentially. Uh, so I'm going to just skip ahead to a passage from the next section real quick here to kind of clarify what he's talking about here. So this is, let's see. Yes, this is section 8, paragraph 5. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept atonement himself. This means that he knows that mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. So just letting that thought drop in, we are all one mind, is accepting the atonement in the moment. But we have to keep accepting the atonement because we keep forgetting that we're one mind, because the illusion of separation is very, very convincing. I personally think it has very good production values. So once he accepts this, his mind can only heal. By denying his mind any destructive potential and reinstating its purely constructive powers, he has placed himself in a position where he can undo the level confusion of others. The message which he then gives to others is the truth that their minds are really similarly constructive and that their own miscreations cannot hurt them. So they can hurt them in the dream, in the illusion. They can certainly be convinced that they've been hurt. It's what we're talking about is basically our standing in heaven, in the kingdom of God. Nothing we do on this level of reality can affect in any way our standing in heaven. In fact, even the good things we do not affect our standing in heaven because in heaven we are just inherently worthy. We are inherently invulnerably innocent. That is just who we are. There's no degrees of that or anything. It's just how it is. So healing is not a miracle because really healing is actually the most natural thing at all because it's getting at the truth. Atonement is the remedy. The degree of error to which it is applied is irrelevant. Again, there are no degrees. Essentially, all healing is the release from fear. But to undertake this, you cannot be fearful yourself. You do not understand healing because of your own fear. I have been hinting throughout that you must heal others. And the footnote here says, These hints begin with the miracle principles, many of which frame miracles as something we give to others in order to heal them. For instance, miracles are a form of healing. They support a lack, they supply a lack, and are performed by those who have more for those who have less. That's from one of the miracle principles. So, in A Course in Miracles, there's a little bit of controversy, I guess, amongst the community. Robert and Emily Perry like to just singly identify or define a miracle as an expression of love. I would say, yes, it is that, and it is a one whose effect is uh, a change in perception, and it could be in the eyes or ears of the receiver of the miracle, that they have changed the way they see something from, you could say, from harmful or from detrimental to not. Okay. The reason is that their healing merely witnesses to yours. So if we are all in one mind, uh, anytime that we are witness to a healing, our mind cannot help but be released, the same as the other mind was, because there wasn't really another mind. A major step in the atonement plan is to undo error at all levels. Illness, which is really not right-mindedness, is the result of level confusion, in the sense that it always entails the belief that what is amiss is in one level can adversely affect another. We have constantly referred to miracles as the means of correcting level confusion. I think in this footnote he's just giving a bunch of examples from the text before this, but I'll just read what he says. A miracle rearranges the order of perception and places the levels in their true perspective. This heals at all levels because all sickness comes from confusing the levels. So I'll just finish this paragraph and get a little bit into the weeds about the term level confusion. In reality, all mistakes must be corrected at the level at which they occur. Okay. So level confusion most often is referred to in the Course in Miracles. It's referring to mm, mistaking the world of spirit, the realm of spirit, which is eternal, and the realm of physical time and space, matter, what we call reality, most of us. And the understanding is that one, you need to make the correction to the error on the same level as you made the error. And it's always on the level of thought. That's where the correction always is, because even our perceptions are due to our thoughts. Um, there's almost like no gap between our thoughts and our perceptions, which is why we really want to start watching our minds like a hawk, because those depressing thoughts, those attack thoughts, we think that they don't have any effect on our spirit, but they do. They're a denial of who we are in truth. And so a mistake or an error on the level of thought does affect us on the level of spirit. Only the mind is capable of error. The body can act erroneously, but this is only because it has responded to misthought. The body cannot create, and to believe that it can, a fundamental error responsible for most of the fallacies already referred to, it produces all physical symptoms. All physical illness represents a belief in magic. The whole distortion which made magic rested on the belief that there is a creative ability in matter, which can control the mind. This fallacy can work either way. That is, it can be believed either that the mind can miscreate in the body, or that the body can miscreate in the mind. If it can be made clear that the mind, which is the only level of causation, cannot generate effects beyond itself, then neither confusion need occur. Okay, so technically speaking, having a error in thought is not harmful to the body. But then there's what we do with our thoughts after we've had an error on that level, which can appear to certainly make the body sick. And he's going to talk about that later on. But just to get a little bit technical about the word magic, again, it's, like he says here, there's a creative ability in matter. The belief in that is magic. So we could say any part of spirituality that has to do with ritual is not really the deal. It's not because that ritual it's like going through motion. That's body business. That's not mind stuff. So that's one aspect of magic, and then another aspect of magic would be all of the material things that we think could either harm us or heal us, such as medicine or therapy, for that matter. None of that stuff can actually heal. It's too in the material world. But he will kind of, I don't think it's in this chapter, but later on he is going to say it's okay to use magical um, remedies for things if your faith has not already grown to the point where you don't need them. And that's basically speaking of, again, how powerful the mind is. Like, if you don't think that that pill is going to cure your ailment, I wouldn't recommend taking the pill. But if you do believe it, you've heard of the placebo effect, and the placebo effect is directly pointing at how powerful the mind is and how powerful belief is. So if you need it in the meantime, until your faith has been built to a certain level, go ahead and take the magic, the pill, the medicine, and hopefully it'll make you feel better. The reason why only the mind can make or create is more obvious than may be immediately apparent. Spirit has been created. The body is a learning device for the mind. Learning devices are not lessons in themselves. Their purpose is merely to facilitate the thinking of the learner. The most that a faulty use of a learning device can do is to fail to facilitate learning. It does not have the power in itself to introduce actual learning errors. And the footnote here says it refers to the learning device rather than the faulty use of the learning device. It refers to the learning device. Thus, the learning device is what does not have the power in itself to introduce actual learning errors. So the learning device does not have the power in itself to introduce actual learning errors. That would be the body. If properly understood, the body shares the invulnerability of the atonement to two-edged application. This is not because the body is a miracle, but because it is not inherently open to misinterpretation. The body isn't really anything. The body doesn't exist, but it does act as like our avatar. As Ram Dass said, it's like our birthday suit. So it's literally gonna be going around as a temple for the mind with us everywhere we go. But we put way too much emphasis on the body in our culture today, as in, having a healthy body is what really makes you healthy, and you need to go out there and exercise, and you need to eat right, and blah, 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 blah. You don't actually really need to do any of those things to be spiritually satiated. The body is merely a fact in this world. Its abilities can be, and frequently are, over-evaluated. However, it is almost impossible to deny its existence in this world. Those who do are engaging in a particularly unworthy form of denial. The use of the word unworthy here implies simply that it is not necessary to protect the mind by denying the unmindful. There is little doubt that the mind can miscreate. If one denies this unfortunate aspect of its power, one is also denying the power itself. So that kind of harkens back to what I was saying before about watching your mind like a hawk and not letting those thoughts gain any traction, those harmful thoughts. It's the definition of gaining traction is when you go into ruminating about something. Now that thought has totally preoccupied your mind and it's just going around and around like a needle stuck in a LP, vinyl LP, and you're not actually getting anywhere with that whole process. You're certainly not getting any more certain about anything by ruminating about it. You're really just working yourself up into a frenzy when you're ruminating. So ruminating is kind of like the ultimate bad habit of thinking. All material means which you accept as remedies for bodily ills are simply restatements of magic principles. He's talking about medicine there. It was the first level, or he could be talking about acupuncture. He could be talking about any medical procedure or a chiropractor appointment. All of those things are material. It was the first level of the error to believe that the body creates its own illness. Thereafter, it is a second misstep to attempt to heal it through non-creative agents. It does not follow, however, that the application of these very weak corrective devices is evil. So it's not evil to take medicine, and it's not evil to self-medicate either. Sometimes the illness has sufficiently great a hold over an individual's mind to render him inaccessible to atonement. In this case, one may be wise to utilize a compromise approach to mind and body, in which something from the outside is temporarily given healing belief. In other words, if the placebo effect is on your side, as in if you believe that this is going to help, you can go ahead and take it. I just wouldn't recommend taking it if you don't believe it's going to help, because then there's no belief in the magic at that time. So this is because the last thing that can help the non-right mind or the sick is an increase in fear. They are already in a fear-weakened state. If they are inappropriately exposed to a straight and undiluted miracle, they may be precipitated into panic. This is particularly likely to occur when upside-down perception has induced the belief that miracles are frightening. So let me see if I can find a particular quote from the book here. Let me just remember where I am. We're on paragraph 10. Because oftentimes when I'm reading these, there comes up for me another quote from the book. And then if I can find it, it helps me to further clarify what's being talked about. Here's the quote. This is from actually just the first section that I did a episode on. When the deep sleep fell upon Adam, he was then in a condition to experience nightmares, precisely because he was sleeping. If a light is suddenly turned on while someone is dreaming, and the content of his dream is fearful, he is initially likely to interpret the light itself as part of the content of his own dream. However, as soon as he awakens, the light is correctly perceived as the release from the dream, which is no longer accorded reality. The value of the atonement does not lie in the manner in which it is expressed. In fact, if it is truly used, it will inevitably be expressed in whatever way is most helpful to the receiver, not the giver. So that's a really important point in that, and Jesus says it someplace, Jesus essentially is in charge of the whole atonement process. He's been in charge of it since his resurrection. And he doesn't like to be redundant with miracles. He likes to switch them up. He likes to call audibles and stuff. And so there's not like a formula for a miracle, and there's no planning for miracles. It is when you are involuntarily speaking from the Holy Spirit that you create miracles, because the Holy Spirit really is in the unconscious mind. Like I've talked about before, there's that layer of muck above it that it has to somehow break through. But it's going to be context specific. In other words, you might say something on this particular day that creates a miracle that would be, from the outside looking in, seem like just the opposite of what you said to a different person yesterday, that created a miracle. So it's like this sense that you are not in charge of, but the Holy Spirit, which was implanted in you, knows of what's the right thing to say right now. And you just have to trust it as you deliver the words, because they're just coming downloading through you. And I think we could get into like, ooh, maybe that's not going to be helpful. And then that's going into self-doubt. Um, and that's not what he's recommending here. This means that a miracle, to attain its full efficacy, must be expressed in a language which the recipient can understand without fear. It does not follow by any means that this is the highest level of communication of which he is capable, but it does mean that it is the highest level of communication of which he is capable now. The whole aim of the miracle is to raise the level of communication, not to impose regression, in the improper sense, upon it. Before it is safe to let miracle workers loose in this world, it is essential that they understand fully the fear of release. Otherwise, they may unwittingly foster that belief that release is imprisonment, which is very prevalent. This misperception arose from the attempted protection device or misused defense that harm can be limited to the body. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's kind of what comes up for me. This was because of the much greater fear, which this one counteracts, that the mind can hurt itself. In other words, the potential miracle receiver unconsciously believes that his errors have harmed or defiled his mind. This belief is so fearful that he tries to displace the defilement to the body, where it becomes physical illness, in order to convince himself that only the body has been damaged. So really that was just a second error on top of the first error, which was saying something that he's now regretting, or she. Now, if the miracle worker heals this person's body, this will remove his defensive shield, leaving him face to face with the terrifying damage he thinks he has done to his mind. He will therefore feel imprisoned, even if he in fact has been released. That's a very interesting statement. So the healee has essentially displaced the damage to the body so that his mind can be still pure. And now that the miracle worker healed his body, it's shoved all the damage back up to and into his mind, and he thinks that he's defiled his mind again, and that he's imprisoned in this like loop of negative thinking. Neither error is really meaningful because the miscreations of the mind do not really exist. That recognition is a far better protection device than any form of level confusion, because of the advantages of introducing correction at the level of the error. So what I think he's referring to in the last part of that paragraph is essentially, it doesn't really exist in heaven. No harm, no foul in heaven. We're still perfectly all right in heaven. All right, paragraph 12. It is essential that the remembrance remain with you that only mind can make or create. Okay, so I'm just gonna use let's just use the iPhone as an example, or any invention that has ever been made. Of course, we think they were made in factories, but what we're really trying to boil everything down to is the creation moment. It was a thought in somebody's head. I think in the case of the iPhone, it was a thought in Steve Jobs' head. Okay? Without that thought, nothing afterwards, nothing of the body stuff or the factory stuff would have ever been accomplished. So we're really trying to understand, one, that this is all about changing your mind. It's not about changing your behavior. The behavior is a symptom of thoughts in the mind and misperceptions. Okay? Um, that is important because, once again, going back to the top of this section, the real errors happen on the thought level, not on the behavioral level. Okay, I've used this metaphor so many times, you're probably sick of hearing it, but if that really was a snake in your garden, then your leaping back in fear would be completely appropriate. It's just that you misperceived it as a snake. It was a garden hose. So therefore, your behavior is inappropriate. But your behavior is inappropriate because you perceived wrongly, and you perceived wrongly because you thought that's a snake. This may seem like splitting hairs, but it's actually really important fundamental stuff that we need to understand. These ideas about level confusion, the levels being thought, behavior, magic, healing, all of those things. We're really trying to hammer down on the idea that this is all about thought. Thoughts are the most important thing you do. Implicit in this, sorry, I'll just start from the top of that paragraph. It is essential that the remembrance remain with you that only mind can make or create. Implicit in this is the corollary that correction belongs at the thought level and not at either level to which correction is inapplicable. To repeat an earlier statement and also to extend it somewhat, spirit is already perfect and therefore does not require correction. The body does not really exist except as a learning device for the mind. This learning device is not subject to errors of its own because it was made but does not make. This footnote is from earlier, I guess, in the same thing. Spirit has been created. The body is a learning device for the mind. The most that a faulty use of a learning device can do is to fail to facilitate learning. It does not have the power in itself to introduce actual learning error. It should be obvious then that correcting the maker, or inducing it to give up miscreation, is the only application of creative power which is inherently meaningful at all. We said before that magic is essentially mindless, or the destructive, miscreative use of mind. Physical medicines are a form of spells. In one way, they are a more benign form, in that they do not entail the possession fallacy, which does enter when a mind believes that it can possess another. Since this is considerably less dangerous, though still incorrect, it has its advantages. I'm going to read this footnote. What is considerably less dangerous, though still incorrect, is the use of physical medications or medicines. It is particularly helpful to the therapist who really wants to heal, but is still fearful himself. By using physical means to do so, he is not engaging in any form of enslavement, even though he is not applying the atonement. This means that his mind is dulled by fear, but is not actively engaged in distortion. Those who are afraid of using the mind to heal are right in avoiding it, because the very fact that they are afraid has made them vulnerable to miscreation. They are therefore likely to misunderstand any healing they might induce, and because egocentricity and fear usually occur together, may be unable to accept the real source of the healing. Under these conditions, it is safer for them to rely temporarily on physical healing devices, because they cannot misperceive them as their own creations. As long as their own vulnerability persists, it is essential to preserve them from even attempting miracles. So it's interesting because I think all of this could be very relatable to the idea of the unhealed healer, who is maybe speaking the words like of A Course in Miracles, for instance, but not actually, um, he hasn't reached the point where his faith is complete and certain. That's when healing actually happens, is when once your faith is certain, and then you're not afraid to say anything. Uh, Fear doesn't exist for you. Okay. So I think, I've spoken to you about my own experience as a therapist over the past 6 years and how it ended with a complaint that I decided not to defend myself against. One of the thoughts that I've had since then is that really I wasn't sold on this enough to be trying to heal other minds, and that basically the universe or God was putting the brakes on this and saying, hey, you were going to quit being a therapist next January, but maybe you should quit here in March and spend the intervening time really healing yourself, healing your own mind, which essentially means doubling down on the practice of A Course in Miracles, which is what I've done. And I can tell you, certainly feel even less fear than I did before, which I thought at the time was a pretty minimal amount of fear compared to most people. But it gave me a chance to look at my own scarcity belief, because now I get to actually experience something much more akin to scarcity on the form level, now that I don't have a career anymore. And now that I'm having experiences of not paying bills, for instance, and realizing all is fine, all is perfectly fine despite all that. And so I think, I'm just bringing in a little bit of personal testimony into this because it's useful to provide that sometimes. That this whole ordeal for me was really an opportunity for me to just get to the next several rungs, sorry, of this ladder of healing that I need to do so that I can actually be a proper healer for other minds. Okay, so that's it for that section. And thank you all for joining me. And once again, if you're finding these ideas helpful, please like and subscribe and hype it too with that little bell icon. Just tap on that and hype the video and help the algorithm out. And I really appreciate all of your comments and questions and hope that you'll keep sending those, and we can break into the regular programming more regularly and just get a little deeper into one idea or another. Okay, have a wonderful day full of blessings and miracles. I'll see you later. Bye for now.